Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome back. It's good to see all of you. It's a privilege to have the first responsive media availability to the statements of Governor-elect Eric J. Holcomb. That's fun to get to say. It's going to take a little while for it to roll off my tongue, but I'm grateful that the Governor-elect has put forth an agenda. We've been waiting on one, and it's certainly helpful to me and to the members of the House Democratic Caucus to have something to react to and something to comment on. A few initial reactions. First of all, candidly, this is a lot more taxes and a lot more spending than I would have expected to see from a Republican governor. Having said that, the tax proposals will be handled in due course. The public is going to get to react. Governor-elect Holcomb is going to have the opportunity to use his bully pulpit and to travel the state and to make the case for them. As I've always said, anytime you're doing new revenue-raising measures, they demand executive leadership. And if he's going to invest his own capital into making the case for new taxes, that's certainly a prerequisite for those measures being enacted. So that's a first observation. And there's quite a bit of new investment in here too. Some of these items on this list are laudatory. There isn't much with which to disagree regarding building our workforce, modernizing our infrastructure system here in this state. Those are the two major limitations on our future economic growth, and I am gratified that he's talking about some of the right things. So there's certainly agreement there. There are differences in detail, certainly differences in approach, but where there are those differences, they're not with respect to the goals. They're with respect to differences of opinion on what we assess the public might be willing to swallow. So that's what we're going to spending the next 4 months trying to ascertain. A few things, though, that also have to be noted is that there's a few things that aren't on here that many Hoosiers would like to see. There are communities throughout Indiana that are seeing their school systems being asphyxiated by recent changes in state funding. That needs to be addressed. I would like to hear something about the 95% of school-age children who are in your traditional public schools. The other thing that's missing here is it's great to talk about investment, it's great to talk about modernizing infrastructure, but there are a lot of perceived differences between the haves and the have-nots. And I talked about this yesterday. There are people from all corners of Indiana that drive through certain parts of the state and marvel at the thoroughfares that seem to be paved and brand new asphalt and seem to have brand new bridges, and they wonder if they've been left behind. And this goes from local streets to county roads to sometimes highways and in parts of Indiana that not everyone travels frequently. Sometimes places that are in different media markets. These matters have to be addressed, because if you're going to be raising new revenue, if you're going to be making new investments, there also needs to be a discussion about how these things are going to be allocated. Is everyone going to be treated fairly? And then I'm always going to say that we have to continue to make a priority the economic growth of our middle class. The indirect things like workforce development and getting new skills are important. Infrastructure investments are important because it makes it easier for people to get to work and to get to new jobs and to move goods and services from the businesses that they're building. But we also need to remember that we have a lot of people that are falling behind, having trouble getting into the middle class, and you have a smaller group of folks that are doing very well. Those income disparities keep widening, not only in our state but in our nation, and we have to remember those things as we're making these policy decisions. Because I did also remark on that yesterday. The culmination of all these recent policy changes is that you're seeing workers and consumers and middle-class Hoosiers bearing more and more of the cost of funding government, and you see some people that are already doing well sharing in less of the burden. there are sacrifices on this sheet of paper that came from the governor, and if those sacrifices are important, they have to be shared to the maximum extent possible. That's the right thing to do. So with that, I look forward to working with the incoming governor. I'm going to be delighted to attend his inauguration bright and early on Monday morning. And a bit of a housekeeping here. Many of you know that I have a 3-month-old son who I love very much. That means that I'm probably going to be traveling back on Thursday afternoons instead of staying over until Friday mornings, which is when I did my media avails in the past. So if there's any patience to be granted in advance for having another Thursday media avail, I'll express my gratitude to the State House Media Corps. So thanks, everyone. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Leader Pelath, could you comment on the governor's proposal to make the superintendent of public instruction appointed rather than elected?
Yeah, I knew that one was going to draw some attention. Let me say, this idea has been kicked around between the parties for a long period of time, and I have to just say, as an individual tax-paying Hoosier, I can see the merits both ways. I've had an open mind to these things. There's been instances when Democrats thought it should be phased out. There's times where Republicans thought it should be phased out. You have to remember, the most important thing is what is the state superintendent, regardless of who that person is or how they got the office, going to do about education once they're in there. So that comes first. I want to make the general observation that we want more voter participation. It's still not up to the levels that I would like to see in a thriving and functioning democracy. But the people that do come out to vote tend not to like to have their choices taken away from them. They probably would like to be able to decide more things directly than fewer things. So this is going to have to take some input from the public. If it's going to be initiated and it's going to be a priority, they're going to have to, it's not going to mean listening to some of the usual organizations that talk about education. It's going to be in the small towns and communities throughout Indiana, what do people really think? Do they want to say, yeah, I don't really want to be able to pick this one anymore? I think they're probably going to get some very wide reactions on that. Making an office appointed when it's been elected is always a little bit of a tough sell, and I'm going to be interested to hear what the strong case is and how it will substantially improve education. It's one thing to change how the office is picked. What policies follow that are what really matter. And if it doesn't make a change, then it's not really much of a reform, other than you don't have the ink on the ballot anymore, or the electron on the electronic ballot. Let's go, Brandon.
On the more taxes and spending than you were expected from a Republican. When it comes to road funding, given the road funding needs for the next 20 years,
right,
is an increase in fuel taxes simply a necessity?
Well, these can be answered empirically. I'm not quite ready to say yet that it should be assigned the word necessity. We do believe that action is necessary. We certainly do believe that we probably want to have something more than just an okay system of infrastructure. We want to have a great one. But there's all sorts of follow-on questions there. Everyone benefits from infrastructure. Everyone ought to share in it. How broad-based are the revenue streams going to be? Can be diversified? Are we just going to lump them all on people paying at the pump, or are other people going to contribute as well? So that's a question. We have to remember, as I pointed out yesterday, we have a lot of tax cuts that are soon to take effect over the next 6 years. You can probably scrounge up quite a bit of revenue without taking a dime from anybody, so that discussion has to be had. And then I want to say, too, and this is what matters to an individual member. If the sacrifice is going to be made by the folks who are going to be paying these, new taxes at the pump, are they going to see a difference? Are they going to see a difference in their own street? Are they going to be assured of that? Are they going to be, or are they just going to think, I'm sitting up here in Dyer, Indiana, and I'm paying all these taxes, and darn it, they're building a new road from, Carmel to Avon. All right, that's a tougher sell. It's not just about the taxes, it's about what's done with the taxes, and do people perceive that their community in their area and where they're raising their kids is going to benefit. So that case still has to be made. The other thing that still has to be made is just the general reaction from the public, because pretty quickly some of it is a little bit, people hear the T word and they get their dander up right away. That's why I say the governor's, I withhold judgment on these things, because the governor has to make the case, because these are hard messages to drive from a part-time legislative body. The chief executive is have to go out on the road and explain, if you support this type of thing, this is the difference you'll see in your area. And that is work that has to be done. Bottom line, there's more work has to be done.
So overall, looking at this, if I'm hearing you right, there's nothing here that raises red flags for you. There's some things you'd like to see on there that aren't there.
Right. Let me tell you, these 5 pillars, I usually think it's better to break them down to 3, but that's an aesthetic difference. All right. But, workforce, improving our skills development, right there with them on a conceptual basis. Better infrastructure, right there with them. Tackling the drug epidemic, they're with them on that too. Those are good things, but in the process of doing good things, are we also solving the types of problems we would like to see solved, like the income disparities, wage growth here in Indiana, better quality of life, more young people wanting to stay here after they've graduated from college or gained their skills. Those are the real metrics that we have to look at. These are a means to an end. So, I think that some of the things are good. The education part needs to be filled in quite a bit more. But there's parts of it there, things like STEM development, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Those, we've been talking about that for years over multiple administrations. Those are, all things that we want to see. I want to say one thing in here I will say that is a little compelling. I'm gonna say something like, "Oh, I didn't expect him to talk about that." Okay, I'll give you one of those. Some of the changes at the Department of Revenue, I think there might be some potential for some governmental service improvements there. It's very difficult to garner the information that's needed from that agency. That transcends different administrations. I think we remember the case of the missing corporate income taxes that happened back under Daniels. Cardin seems to remember that one a little bit. Nikki, you probably remember that too. Those are the types of things to be avoided. I don't know whether the cost makes any sense, but the interest in doing that and becoming a little bit more innovative on potentially on the collections end in a way that doesn't make things administratively so difficult, particularly for some small business taxpayers, that could end up being a positive thing.
Yesterday you said you wanted to wait to see what the governor thought about these taxes. Now it's official. You've got Senate, House, and now the Republican governor-elect calling for taxes. Did you think you'd hear that week 1 of the session from the other side of the aisle?
I had a hunch. It was clear that in the previous session, Speaker Bosma put all this forward, but he was going to have a hard time getting Mr. Family, Faith, and Freedom to go along, who's about to become vice president. And you're going to have, the Senate just wasn't interested in that in an election year. This being not an election year, a budget cycle, it doesn't surprise me that it's become a little bit more policy wonkish. So, but now, like I was just telling with Brandon, the hard part starts now. Governors have to go sell this thing, and I've done it. I've been part of this because when O'Bannon was governor, we had to make some of these tough decisions. It was a tough sell job, and I want to let them know, you don't just have to sell it before you make the vote. You got to sell it sometimes for a couple of years after the vote. They got to be willing to do the work, and the people have to be convinced that they're going to see the return on investment. That's where the tough part happens.
Would you rather have a tax increase if we did it on gas taxes or whatever? Would you rather have that go instead of to a state fund to maybe more local funds or something like that? Or
as a rule, I tend to favor policies that get more into the local road and street accounts because I think they're the ones that are really hurting. I also want to remind everyone it's been my was my proposal to use many of the sales tax dollars that we collect on gasoline and move it all over into transportation funding. I promise you, you go out to the public and people think that makes total sense, because they think that's where it's going anyways. So there's other things that can be done if the choice is willing to be made without going this far. But if they're talking 20 years into the future and they want to do something very long term, I think everyone is commanded to at least give it a fair listen. But I do know that from some of the email reactions that I already got unsolicited, I don't know, maybe I'll get to share them with you one day. We'll see how the rules go. But some of the constituent contacts I got, and these weren't people that have been stirred up, they were just monitoring the news, I'll just say it was a little shaded towards the negative side. But we'll see if that changes, because we can't ever forget it's their state. It's their state.
What do you think about his proposal to double the preschool investment but keep it within those same 5 counties?
I just don't know what all the hand-wringing is about. I don't think that gets you as nice of a post-legislative press conference as it did with the first pilot project. It sounds like just more of a pilot project. I mean, how much, I just am wondering how much more data that they need. So, and, you know, there's other communities that would certainly benefit over the long term, particularly with respect to job recruitment and keeping young citizens here in this state. So, certainly would like to see it expanded much more than this, but, you know, I understand there's choices to be made, and he made a different choice.